Welcome again to our CPD in 43 series. This is our event for April, a guide to door hardware from the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers. We have our speaker, Douglas Masterson, who's going to be providing this talk to us today. As usual, please do field any questions in the chat box so we can ask Douglas towards the end of the talk in our lively Q&A. This is a slightly reduced version of a slightly longer talk that the Institute provides. So if you would like a more in-depth talk, please do get in touch with Douglas directly. He's also indicated that he'd be happy to provide a CPD certificate, so we will be adding his email into the chat box for you guys to contact him directly to request those. But without further ado, I will hand this over to Douglas, and I will be in the background for any additional support, and I will see you at the Q&A session.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thank you also for the invitation to come and present to you this afternoon. So this, as has been said, this is a presentation. This has been approved by CIAT, as well as by the Society for British Interior Designers and the Royal Institute of British Architects. It is a slightly truncated version in order to bring it into the CPD in 43. So just in terms of the background, who we are the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers. We have been going since 1961 and are really all about the promotion of standards and best practice within the architectural ironmongery industry. We're the only trade body that is in the UK who are dedicated to promoting the interests of the whole industry. That includes manufacturers as well as architectural ironmongers. And we have a global membership as well with students worldwide. We have our membership includes as far away as New Zealand, South Africa, Dubai, Hong Kong. We have students all over the world who we train. We have an industry education portfolio, everything from a foundation in hardware, which can be done online, right through to individual courses, including on scheduling and specification, doors, access control, standards, as well as having a CPD program, which allows our members to have Reg AI status. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. In terms of myself, my name's Douglas Masterson. I have been over 30 years in the ironmongery trade, which is probably shocking to you all because of my youthful looks. I have been involved right from the bottom up, so right through from the trade counter into managing an ironmongery business, which I managed for 10 years in Belfast and in Dublin. Before I came to work full-time for the Guild back in 2014. So I have a number of industry positions, including co-chair of Working Group 12 for competence in construction products. I'm also a member of Working Group 7 for designers. They were set up post-Grenfell. I'm a member of the Competence Steering Group, as well as the Passive Fire Protection Forum. I chair the BIM Fenestration Relevant Authority, and I represent the industry in terms of for standards, revision and creation of standards at ISO, CEN, and BSI level. So that's me. Okay, enough about me, enough about the Guild, on with the show. So the learning aims of this CPD are as follows. We'll take a look at what we mean by ironmongery and an architectural ironmonger. Considerations when you're going to specify door hardware, how the specification is put together, how you find an architectural ironmonger, once you've found them, how to work effectively with them, some of the risks in the specification of ironmongery, how to avoid them, and then finally some useful links for further advice. Okay, so what do we mean by ironmongery? Well, the term ironmongery itself is quite an old, archaic word. It originally applied to iron-made hardware for domestic use, although today it covers a much wider range of products, also known as building hardware or architectural hardware. And today's architectural ironmongery increasingly incorporates sophisticated electronics to control locking and access. So access control is an integral part of what we would see as architectural ironmongery. Now, when you have a specified list of product, you then are in possession of an ironmongery schedule. And in order to put together this ironmongery schedule, there's a considerable amount of knowledge, experience, expertise, skills, knowledge which are required to be able to put together that schedule or that specification. So an AI, as we call them, some people think of AI, think of artificial intelligence. An AI in our trade is an architectural ironmonger. And the architectural ironmonger works with architects, designers, technologists, contractors, and others to specify all the hardware that is going to be needed for every door in a building, and therefore to produce a full ironmongery schedule of all the hardware items. Architectural ironmongers are really expert in hardware that is used in domestic and commercial buildings for the functioning of doors, either as door assemblies or as door sets. Now, there are many products which will be included in the specification. We'll go into those in a bit more detail later, but they will include things like your hinges to hang the door closing devices, the locking devices, pull handles or lever handles, letter plates, disabled grab rail kits, specialist window fittings, washroom equipment, and signage. All of these can be incorporated within the ironmongery schedule. So we'll move on now to some of the things that should be considered when specifying ironmongery. And these are the questions that a good AI is going to be asking you, and you should really be thinking of whenever you're specifying door hardware. Of course, the type of building, the function that it's expected to perform, the period or style of the building itself, what is the door type, what finishes are required, and what is your budget. So we'll go through these one by one. So what type of building is it for? Because getting the right hardware for a particular building involves functional as well as aesthetic considerations. Hospitals, schools, care homes, for example, will need fittings that are appropriate for less physically able as well as vulnerable users. Safety and security requirements may also vary between types of buildings as well. So what type of building is it for? Well, you may find on a particular type of building that you will require specialist architectural ironmongery. That can include antibacterial or antimicrobial, something which came much more to the fore during the recent pandemic. Anti-ligature fittings, which will help mitigate against the risk of self-harm. Biometrics and access control in terms of how people can get into the building, as well as braille and accessible signage. So there's some specialist ironmongery that's out there, and there is also a CPD which has been approved by CEAT on ironmongery for specialist applications, which will delve much more deeply into this. Further question is, what function is it expected to perform? So for example, your door, what will your door need to be? Will it need to be self-closing? Will it need to be held open? Will it need to be locked or latched? Does it have to be free from fastenings, i.e. unlocked? Do you need a lever handle or a pull handle? Getting the right fittings in the right location will always enhance a user's experience of a building. Door hardware itself is the building's most tactile aspect of a door or of a building, and one that your users will come into contact with on a continuing basis. It has been said that the ironmongery is the handshake of the building. And when you think about it in terms like that, it's very often the first thing that someone will come into contact in a building. And if you have a bad experience of ironmongery, it can have an impact on your experience in the building itself. So the further question, what function is it expected to perform? So the choice of hardware will impact on building performance issues, including acoustics, airflow, drafts, durability, and longevity. So these are all considerations with items such as handles and door closing devices, which are going to be in almost constant use throughout the life of the building. Now, here's another one to consider, is the period or style of the building. Aesthetics is a prime consideration to ensure that the door hardware that has been specified complements and, of course, enhances the finished project. Therefore, it's worth identifying the period or style of building that they will be reflecting and allow the architectural ironmonger to work with you to make the best choice alongside yourselves. It will help the AI to coordinate the different hardware items throughout the project and, where necessary, match new fittings with pre-existing hardware. Always talk to your AI, your architectural ironmonger, about the bespoke solutions that they may have available. So you'll see something there in terms of that picture there, and that's in a bronze finish. So it's possible to get bronze finishes, not just for the handles, for the lever handles, for the pull handles, but also for the door closing devices, for the fore ends of the locks, for the kicking plates. And then you have this complete suite of ironmongery which runs and throughout the building and which complements the style of the building itself. So something else to consider as well is what is the door type, the type of door. And within that, you're going to need to take a looking at things like the location of the door. What is its function? What are its dimensions? So is it a fire door or is it a non-fire door? That will have an impact on the ironmongery that has been specified. Should it be locked or unlocked? If it's locked, does it need to be electronically locked if it's going to require access control? Do you need to have automatic operators on the door? So is it one where you can just have it manually opening, or where you will have it either you walk into a radar and the door opens itself, or where you're hitting a button and again the door will open as well? Escape and panic functions as well. So that will have a marked impact, and we'll come to those a little bit later, as well as the thickness of the door, the height of the door, and the weight of the door, because that will also be impact with the ironmongery, particularly the likes of the hinges and the door closing devices. And then we touched on this earlier, the finishes that are required. Now, ironmongery or door hardware comes in a wide selection of materials. And again, it depends on the type of building and the aesthetic that you're looking for. So you can have stainless steel, aluminium, brass, iron, or other metals, as well as wood, with a range of finishes. Now, your first concern is likely to be the appearance of the finish, but there are functional considerations which need to be factored into the final choice. So, for example, some finishes are unsuitable for certain environments. Certain grades of stainless steel, for example, are vulnerable to the chemicals in a swimming pool environment or a chemical factory, whilst lacquered brass is liable to degrade in a seaside setting. So all these things need to be considered. This is why whenever you're looking to get an architectural ironmongery specification put together, that you really need to look at speaking to the experts. And of course, what is your budget? You should have at least a ballpark figure for the architectural ironmongery budget on your project. And the ironmongery schedule will help you with that, because it will ultimately provide you with an indicative cost per door figure for the ironmongery. And it's always really important to get it right. There are many projects that people are involved in where they just go ahead and specify the ironmongery, and then whenever the job goes on site, there isn't the budget, and then all of a sudden the good works and everything that has been put together and the vision can be very quickly disassembled because the budget is evaporated or the budget was never there in the first place. So I'm going to move on now to the specification process itself. The ironmongery schedule is there to detail every piece of hardware: the hinge, the door closer, the lock, the door furniture, the kicking plate, the signs. All of it is put together in an ironmongery schedule. It specifies every single piece of hardware and is drawn up by the architectural ironmonger who draws up that schedule. So this section here is going to look at the methodology of how a schedule is brought together, as well as the logical sequence of doing so. So what we normally teach in the GAI for our students when they're specifying is the following: hang it, close it, lock it, operate it, protect it, label it, seal it, and then anything extra. And I'm going to go through now each individual section, but hang the door, close the door, lock the door, operate the door, and we sort of work from one side and the whole way up and round again. And that tends to be the way that we will teach people how to specify ironmongery. You start with the hinges. Hinges are actually, in our opinion, the most important part of a fire door. Get the hinges wrong, the door itself will not work. It will drag, it will drop, and your fire door will not work correctly if it drops and rubs against the floor. So when you're hanging the door, consider the use of the door, the type of construction, the location, the size, and the weight. They are so important, hinges, that they need to be CE marked to the BSEN 1935 standard. Efficient hinges will reduce the closing friction for door closing devices, for example, and always consider self-lubricating long life bearings on the hinges. That's hinges. There are alternatives that are available to hang a door. You may, for example, decide that if it is a heavily trafficked door that you want to go to a floor spring. Very often you will see that in heavy duty applications such as in hospitals. Transit mounted door closers, pivots. There are different ways of being able to do it. So those, not just in terms of hinges as well. And a good architectural ironmonger will be able to advise on what is best to use. You move from hanging the door to closing the door. It must be adequate for its purpose. You have to be certain that you know the size and the weight of the door, particularly if it's a fire door, the door width, possibility of wind pressure, and again, it must be CE or UKCA marked to EN 1154 or for doors which are on fire or escape. There are different types of door closers, so you can have it as a face fixing pattern or you can have it concealed in the head of the door. Moving on to lock the door. There are a number of standards which are available for to ensure that you need to look at with locking the door. BSEN 12209 is the standard which the door, the lock on the door must be again be CE Mark II. You're going to have cylinders which can meet the standard BSEN 1303. If it's a security door and you're looking for BS 3621. There's further information on the dimensions of locks available in BS 8300, which is the standard which relates to accessibility. And as well as that, if you're going to have a security door set to PAS 24, you need to ensure that that door has been fully tested and you're using the correct lock and all the furniture within the test. I'm very quickly skipping through a lot of these slides you may pick up, but as I say, I want to try and get as much done and covered within the time. Panic escape is very important. With panic escape, you need to have panic escape doors which have a bar across all or most of the width of the door. That is where there are more than 60 people likely to use the exit or where people are unfamiliar with the building, therefore likely to panic an emergency. They also have to be correctly labelled with a push bar to open sign. If it's an emergency escape, that is where employees can be trained in the use of panic hardware during a fire drill, thus reducing the risk of panic, therefore less likelihood of a crush at the door. You can have push pads or you can have lever handles, but they must be CE marked to BSEN 179. Whatever device you're using, a single-handed operation must withdraw all bolts immediately. You can also have access control, as I mentioned. Various types of readers can be used, fobs, cards, biometrics, even mobile phones. The locking devices themselves can include hardwired solenoid or motor locks or mag locks, magnetic locks. And you can have these systems either offline or online where they're backed up to a PC system. We also have a full CPD all in relation to ironmongery and access control available. We move on to operating the door. The lever handles should be fitted for intended purpose. They should conform to the standard BSEN 1906, and they should be provided with bolt-through fixings. That ensures you've got stability in the installation and stops the lever handle being pulled off the door. If you're using a lever with a round rose, which is this kind of device here, you will also need what are called escutcheons or cylinder roses to dress the cylinder, and you should also consider if you're going to specify knob furniture, because in relation to inclusive design and BS 8300, working knob furniture is not recommended under BS 8300. There are examples as well in BS 8300, indicative designs for what can be used. And again, there's further information on that in the CPD on accessibility, which is also available. You also can protect the door, so you need to specify the kicking plates, normally for both sides of the door. You can also have kitchen doors and high traffic doors where they'll use trolley plates, and the sizes should initially be taken as the total door width on an ironmongery schedule, but the site size is then provided from site personnel. And then you're going to label the door. There are following types of signs that can be specified by the architectural ironmonger. Mandatory signs, so the likes of fire door keep shut, fire door keep locked, etc. to BS 5499 are mandatory on a fire door under approved document B. You can also specify female or male symbols. And it may be that it doesn't need those, but there are other elements such as an office or a private, then those are things which the AI can specify as well. And intumescent. So intumescent seals are vital to the timber fire door. When heated by fire, they expand to fill that space between the door and the frame, and they're often supplied in a plastic or metal casing. They're fitted to the sides and to the top of the door or the frame. And as I say, when heated by fire, they will expand to fill that space between the door and the frame. Okay, then you can have other hardware extras, the miscellaneous, the door stops, the door viewers, the coat hooks, washroom accessories. They can all be specified by a good architectural ironmonger. Now, I'm going to talk about how to find an architectural ironmonger. I'm hoping that anybody who's on this call knows what an architectural ironmonger is and knows who the best ones are to get and how to find them. Use a qualified AI. Using that will mean your specification is prepared by a fully qualified professional. They're compliant with the current legislation. They will use the latest technology and products available, because ironmongery, particularly in electronic locking and door automation, does tend to move quite quickly. The ironmongery can conform to the latest standards, particularly some of the mandatory standards that I've already spoken about, and they can therefore demonstrate their competence. And demonstration of competence, as I'm sure you know, is huge at the moment, particularly after the Building Safety Act and in the wake of the Grenfell Tower. So you can have various different qualifications. One of them is a DIP GAI. So that's a diploma from the Guild of Architectural Ironmongers. So it's recommended that at the very least you use the service of someone with a DIP GAI, someone who has taken a 3-stage study program to lead to the qualification. They can provide comprehensive advice on specification of all door hardware. That's at the very least. But the further recommendation that we would have is to use a registered architectural ironmonger. Because what happens with a Reg AI is they build on their knowledge and they keep themselves up to date with their CPD, just as you are today. We have our own CPD program where people need to obtain 20 points throughout the year. We keep our members up to date with technical innovations, standards, and legislation. And a Reg AI is someone with a very clear demonstration of competence. You can find a Reg AI on the GAI website under the Find a Member. So that's somewhere where you can look to find one. We're moving on how to work effectively with an architectural ironmonger, and we are going to give you some hints and tips. Your relationship should be built on trust. Once the spec has been agreed, you should really feel comfortable leaving your ironmonger to manage the door hardware element of the project and bring that to a successful conclusion, and only consulting with you when it's necessary. Now, at the start of a new working relationship, it's worth investing time in 1 or 2 meetings, either face-to-face or by Teams, and that helps you establish the clear lines of communication. Blindly sending someone a set of floor plans and a door schedule and a head and jam details will not get the best out of your architectural ironmonger. It's always best to try and give them an idea of what it is that you're looking for. Now, there's 4 pieces of advice that we would give for anybody to work with their AI. Think about the door hardware early on. Think about the door details. Think about the interfaces. And also think about what CPD provision that they can provide you with. So if we go on to our first one, do think about it early on. Don't leave it until the last moment to approach an AI to get the specification done. It is a core component of the project. Think about it in terms of that. Architectural ironmongery is not an add-on. If you leave it to the very end, your doors will not function correctly. Think about the door details that you can provide. It will speed up that specification process if your AI is supplied with a floor plan with all the door numbers that are numbered individually, a door schedule which will list each door and its dimensions and its makeup. An AI must have all these details as well as the joinery details to ensure that the ironmongery being specified is correct for each door type. And it's worth remembering not to allow doors to be manufactured unless the door specification has been checked for compatibility with the architectural ironmongery that has also been specified. So do ensure, because that's really important. Think about your interfaces as well. Inform your AI if there are other parties that are already involved. You may already have the access control and electronic locking being looked at through the mechanical and electrical M&E package. Provide the AI with details of any existing hardware on existing buildings. That may include a master key suite, because one of the things that the architectural ironmonger will also look at doing is to provide you with detail on master keying. So you very often will sit down with a client to say, how do you want your building suited? Where do you want the master key? Do you need any sub-master keys? Who needs to have a key to each individual door? Is there an existing suite that we need to work in alongside? That may require a site visit, but it is really, really important that you think about those interfaces and risks. I'm going to move on to risks now and how to avoid them. Issues with door hardware can very much adversely affect the project that you are working on. It can cause delays, it can impact on costs, and it can even delay the handover of a project, which can, of course, lead to financial penalties. So this section is going to look at 3 specific areas of risk, including not allowing enough time, safety and security, and changes after the specification. Not allowing enough time. A large project may involve hundreds of doors and literally thousands of fittings. In my lifetime, I've been involved in quite a number of big projects, including the likes of the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, including many hospital buildings in Belfast, hotels, various different ones. There are hundreds of doors and thousands of fittings on those. So if insufficient time is allowed for all the hardware to be initially specified, but finally sourced, delivered, and fitted, there is a risk that handover could be delayed because there are so many items. A qualified architectural ironmonger will have a very good knowledge of the lead times that are required. If it is a specific finish where they need to be specifically finished, or where they need to have your kicking plates, where the cylinders need to be suited specifically, all of these things are impacted. A good architectural ironmonger can coordinate the supply of a project to ensure that it is delivered to site on time, so long as they are given sufficient time to do it. The worst thing that you can have as an architectural ironmonger is a contractor placing an order saying, I need all the things in 2 weeks. And you've been chasing them for 2, 3, 4 months. That does not give enough time to be able to do the job properly. So planning and managing that schedule takes all of these factors into account. Safety and security as well. Architectural ironmongery has a huge impact on both the safety and security of a building. It is subject to over 60 British and European standards, which are regularly updated. And I know that because I'm the poor sod who's on the committee that has to do many of them. It is also subject to building regulations covering areas such as security, fire safety, accessibility, and acoustics. And as we mentioned, the handover can be delayed if the door hardware doesn't meet all the required standards of safety or security. Again, a qualified architectural ironmonger can and will provide you advice on all these issues. Now, this is another huge risk. Changes after specification. Sadly, changes are sometimes made to the spec when the project is already underway. And sometimes that can happen. Maybe there's a slight redesign that needs to be made. But it can create hard to foresee knock-on effects, which also pose that risk of delay on the project. The best course is to agree the correct specification at the outset and do your very best to stick to it. Where changes can't be avoided, it is important to make them as early as possible and factor in all the ramifications. Bearing in mind as well with regards to specification changes, if you've been working with an architectural ironmonger from the very start and you've specified your finishes, the product that you want, how it's specified, how it's scheduled, and all the various different elements that comes along, and then at the 11th hour, at literally at the death of the project, the contractor or subcontractor decides that for the sake of budget that they want to change the specification. That can have a huge impact and a huge effect, because all that head knowledge that has been brought throughout the life of the project, throughout the past 2-3 years, is gone, and you have somebody who's looking at with completely fresh eyes simply because they're that bit cheaper. So these are huge things that need to be considered whenever you're looking at specification changes. If changes need to be made to a specification and an architectural ironmonger has been on board from the start, they can help and advise, particularly if there are issues in relation to budget. But sticking with the person who created the specification in the first place is of huge importance. Wow, I can't believe I actually got that down to about half an hour. So just in terms of for conclusion now, any further information that you're looking for, go to the GAI website. There are also specifiers guides which are available on that. So if you go to gai.org.uk and go to the knowledge base, there are specifiers guides as well as brand new end user guides which can be downloaded for free. And these are not for GAI members. This is for anybody. So if you want to take a look at that. Also, there's a code of practice for hardware for fire and escape doors and that's available on that website. And you can also see further information and detail on fire doors on the Fire Door Inspection Scheme website. I think that's the quickest I've ever gone through a CPD in my life. And hopefully with my accent and the speed of delivery, you've caught 95% of that. But hopefully are we okay on time then? I think you're on mute. Are you on mute? I cannot hear you, I'm afraid. Nope, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, try again.
How
That's
about
better.
now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
My headphones off as well.
Yeah, so apologies for that. Thank you so much for that, Douglas. That was very helpful, and thank you for racing through that. I know obviously this is usually supposed to take probably double the time, roughly.
Yeah, double the time. So there were a few slides removed, and I sped up the delivery and skipped over a few bits. Hopefully, it was enough to give you a flavour for architectural ironmongery, and hasn't put you off for
Exactly.
life.
So just to touch on that point, obviously, whilst we're having a discussion, please do add in some questions into the chat box so I can field them to Douglas. Just so you guys are aware, so this talk, which is an introduction to door hardware, is typically around 45-50 minutes at normal pace, so roughly about double the time. And as mentioned at the beginning of the talk, there's 12 CPDs that the GAI have had accredited and approved via CIAT, RIBA, and SBID as well. They'd be more than happy to arrange or these CPDs to others in due course, obviously by getting in touch with Douglas directly. And obviously, if this is something that everyone would like for us to look at in the future, we can obviously review the other events that they have where they prepared information, and we can obviously arrange that in due course to fit in with our, say, following year's CPD schedule, for example. Is as everyone probably is aware, and many people obviously in practice do know, that doors are a very interesting subject which have a huge amount of variables. Is the age old adage is that you get asked a question by a client, and they don't realize what rabbit hole that they've entered when they're trying to ask us a simple question, as most people coin them. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll hopefully go across to the questions section to see if there's any questions. So just give me a second. I'll have a quick read. There was a series of questions towards the beginning regarding the placement of kick plates, whether they go on pull side, push side, and so on. I do know from experience that you need to be careful in regards to not only doors, but prominent walls or corners, for example, for contamination control. So sometimes you may end up specifying additional protection just to be sure you don't have issues in just from the contamination side of things. But obviously I'll let you answer in a bit more detail.
Yeah, okay. So in relation to kicking plates, many people will just specify the kicking plate to one side of the door only, which is the door which is pushed, because people very often will kick the door. Unless it's a double swing door. If it's a double swing door, then you would always do it to both sides. One of the reasons why some people specify kicking plates to both sides of the door is how, for example, contamination, mops, for example. So if people are mopping and they're mopping on both sides, right up to the door, to both sides of the door, then you can get moisture that comes right up and in. It's really down to what people prefer. And again, the architectural ironmonger can provide information and can provide advice and to say, and many people are just happy to go to just one side of the door, and that's fine. There will be kicking plates, for example, if it's into an accessible bathroom where instead of going for a 150 mil, they might go for a 300 or a 400 millimeter. And as well as that, as I mentioned, for kicking plates, you can have them at mid-rail plates for hospitals, or trolley plates. So it really comes down to the specification for the architectural ironmonger. Yes, many people will do the one side only, but you can do it on both sides, and it really comes down to what the individual choice is.
Okay, interesting. Sorry, that question was from Niall. So thank you for that, Niall. We've got a question in from Toby. What key items would you include in an architectural specification for ironmongery to ensure that the robustness can't be watered down during the contractor's VE process?
It's a really good question. That the difficulty that you have is that whenever you're specifying, I suppose it really comes down to, first of all, what's your budget. And so what I'll do is I'll talk the way and think the way I used to think in my last job whenever I was when I managed an ironmongery business back in Belfast. So we would have specified at a certain level, obviously down to the budget. What you could do when it comes to value engineering is you can take a look and say at the specification. It could be, for example, that you would specify cam action door closers, which would have the arms of the door closer parallel to the door in a rail. It could be then, for example, that if a value engineering is required, that you could change from that type onto a standard rack and pinion or a scissor arm. So there are different ways of being able to do it. It could be that instead of the door furniture going for a lever handle, which is 40, 50 pounds a set, you could maybe go for one to 10 to 15 pounds a set. That is maybe a slightly different design from a different manufacturer, which have similar guarantees. Maybe not just look as pretty, but which would still be able to withhold and withstand scrutiny. I tended to find that I got myself, if it was a project where the contractor came to me and said, look, we don't have the money left. We've spent all our money early on. And I know the architect or the designer really wanted all this fancy stuff. I just don't have the money. What can you do? Speaking to the architectural ironmonger who specified it is much easier than just giving it to somebody else with a shopping list, because you can say, right, well, okay, I know that initially they had wanted this type of one. For example, it could be, instead of a stainless steel door closer cover, we can give you a silver one, and give you a silver door closer. That could knock off maybe on some projects that could knock thousands of pounds off it, and on something that actually might not be really noticed. So there's all sorts of things that an architectural ironmonger can do, but when it comes to the specification, it's difficult to say what key items would you include in an architectural specification. What you need to specify is what is required. The level that you specify it at may be different, but a good architectural ironmonger will know the means of being able to try and trim the budget in such a way that you as the specifier are going to get what you want, but it's still going to be able to try and bring it within budget. But the key items will always be the items that I talked about: hanging the door, closing the door, locking the door. Those items there, in particular, panic escape hardware, you have to have product on that for fire and escape doors that are CE marked. It's just so important, because that's actually the law. It's under the construction product regulation that you have to have CE marked. And it was initially supposed to be UKCA marked as a mandatory from the start of this year, although the government have kicked the can down the road for another 2.5 years on UKCA. But at the very least, CE marked ironmongery on certain key items. But there's certain things that you don't scrimp on. And as I say, the likes of the hinges, the door closer, the lock, lever handles you need to be careful on, because you need to ensure that although they don't need to be CE marked, You need to ensure that you've got something that's bolt through, something that won't come off in your hand. There's nothing worse than that, particularly if it's a fire door or a door where you're going in for escape. So I suppose really that's why I'm saying work with the architectural ironmonger. They will be able to help you with the budget, because that's what we as AIs are used to doing. We're used to, setting the spec up with the specifier, and then having to try and defend the specification with the contractor. So hopefully that helps you.
Great. We've got a question in from Nathan. Where might information be found for specifying appropriate architectural ironmongery for dementia inclusive / mind friendly design?
Yeah,
that's a really interesting question, actually.
Well, if you go to our website, first of all, there is a CPD which we have had approved by CEAT and REBA and SBID on ironmongery, on specialist ironmongery. That includes anti-ligature. It also has dementia inclusive as well. So there's a CPD available on that, but we also have a specifier's guide on it. So if you go to the GAI website, gai.org.uk, if you go to the knowledge base and you click on the knowledge base, you will see a drop down, and on the drop down you will see specifiers guides. So there's good information on that. What I would say is, again, speak to your ironmonger. These are people who are trained and who know what to specify within these environments. And there are certain things that that can and should be specified in certain environments if you're speaking to the right people. If it's a nursing home, for example, on the entrance door of a bedroom in a nursing home, you can specify what's called a swing-free door closing device. And what that means is the door closer itself does not work as a normal door closer. Whenever you go to open the door, it doesn't automatically close, because there's a solenoid inside it which keeps the door where it just swings back and forth. Then when the fire alarm sounds, it will automatically kick in and close in fully into the door. So there are key things there which a good architectural ironmonger who's properly trained will know what to use. It's the same with signage, etc. as well. So hopefully that helps you.
Great. We've got a question in from Nathan. Who is responsible for procuring architectural ironmonger on a traditional contract? Is it the consultant or the contractor? And then I guess let's take it out further. Generally, in regards to projects, also the same question.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, what you tend to find is that as an AI, as an ironmonger, you tend to deal more in terms of it's the main contractor or the joinery subcontractor who will do the procurement. When it comes down to it, it depends on the relationship as well between the specifier and the contractor. So I tended to find that if I was specifying ironmongery in a project, especially in Northern Ireland here, where it's a slightly smaller market, we tended to find if we specified the ironmongery, if we worked with the architect or the technologist or whoever it was at the start, but we're also working in tandem with the contractor to try and help bring it into budget, you were normally able to get the order. Not always, but normally. And so I suppose the person who ultimately who's responsible for procuring it as the architectural ironmonger is going to be the contractor or the subcontractor, the one who's placing the order and the one who's paying the bills.
Interesting. And I think I'll ask let's just see. So I've got one. I was about to say I'll ask the final question, but it looks like we've got one that's come in last minute. So from Ricky, my ironmongery schedule doesn't have fire/acoustic seals. I thought this was by the door manufacturer.
Intumescent is one of those areas, and thank you for that question, where it can sit in either camp. Very often what we will find is many architectural ironmongers will specify the intumescent seals and the intumescent protection, because when it comes down to it, particularly for intumescent protection, when you're specifying the ironmonger, you don't know who the door manufacturer is going to be, because we're involved so early in the project. We don't even know who the contractor is going to be, never mind who's going to be supplying the doors, because we're sitting down at the very, very start before it even goes to tender. So the architectural ironmonger is providing the detail that will go into the bill of quantities. So at that stage, you are looking at providing a list of product. Now, certain AIs will say, no, I don't want to get involved in the fire acoustic seals, because yes, particularly if it's an acoustic door as well, the door manufacturer, if it's a specialist door, will do that. But there are others who will say, look, we will put it into the specification. If there's a double count, then that's fine, you can take it out. but very often it's better to put it in and then have the opportunity to have it taken out than nobody to take for it. So it is a bit of a difficult one. And again, what I would recommend is if you're specifying or asking an architectural ironmonger to specify, ask them what their policy is and just say, look, can you provide the acoustics? We have manufacturers of acoustics and intumescent within our membership of the GAI and who work very, very closely. I would always have specified the intumescent and have specified the likes of the acoustic drop-down seals on a door whenever I was putting together an ironmongery schedule. It could be that it was maybe taken out and then given to the door manufacturer, but I worked on the basis that it was better to have it in than not have it at all.
I'll go with a final one because it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So an interesting one, which probably a good chunk of people may be aware of, but maybe a good chunk may not, is that with regards to hinges, you tend to find them in different locations depending on the door location and use. So you tend to find them maybe 2 at the top, for example, and things like that. So it'd be interesting just to hear a little bit on that from yourself whilst we have you.
Okay. I kind of feel, I look after the GAI technical helpline, so I get lots of questions from our own members. And this is one that comes up all the time. And I kind of feel like I should have 3 words tattooed across the top of my head: fire test evidence. Because if it's for a fire door in particular, it's going to be down to what's within the fire test evidence or the field of application from the fire door manufacturer. They will be the ones who will dictate that. So if it has been tested where it's 2 at the top and one there, and the one further down, that's really where it should be installed. Now, that's where it should be installed. If it's a fire door set where it's coming from all the components from the door and the ironmongery and everything from the one source, then they'll know where to put it. If it's to be assembled on site, really the person who is going to be fitting it on site should be taking a look at the instructions from the door manufacturer to see their recommendations. So normally you tend to find you've got two nearer the top and 1 closer to the bottom, because that can help with the door in terms of the not having too much external force at the top of it. Normally that's the way it goes, but it'll come down very much to what the door manufacturer says. The door manufacturer's fire test evidence and test evidence trumps everything else within the ironmongery. And even if the architectural ironmongery manufacturer, hardware manufacturer, has test evidence for a hinge, for a door closer, for a lock, that's useful to know. But when it comes down to it, it will come down to the fire test evidence for the actual door from the door manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So just want to say thank you so much for doing the talk today, Douglas. It's been really informative, and I hope everyone's appreciated this rapid door hardware CPD. And we look forward to speaking to you in due course for upcoming CPD schedules. It'd be if anyone would like a CPD certificate, I've popped Douglas's email into the chat box. Please do contact him directly. As everyone knows, this talk will be uploaded to YouTube in due course. And also as well, Douglas, if you're happy to, if you could send across the presentation so that we can share that via email to everyone that signed up via Eventbrite in a follow-up email to this event. That'd be much appreciated. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Our upcoming event for the following month is Rectosil. If I can quickly share my screen, I can show you the talk on the screen. It is live now on Eventbrite, but here it is. So it's managing thermal performance. So this is from Rectosil. So it proves to be really interesting, especially with it being focused on a very specific subject. If there are any suggestions for any other events, please do get in touch with us directly. We're more than happy to discuss and curate events, etc. We have virtually the most of 2023 already organized, and we will be looking to fulfill 2024 in due course. So please do attend the events. These are all here for you, and please do feedback, and we're always looking to improve. But without further ado, I will bring the event to a close. Thank you again, Douglas, and goodbye, everyone.
Very welcome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, now. Bye.